Joining me on this episode of the Neil Wilkins podcast, I'm delighted to welcome Nisha Srivastava. Now, Nisha is I guess you could say, wears many hats, but is a holistic lifestyle coach, has over 3 decades of experience in what we might term movement practices, amongst a whole other range of therapies, disciplines, and very much working with some very high profile, I guess you could call them A-list musicians, actors, and also professional sports teams. So welcome to this episode, Nisha.
Good afternoon, Neil, and thank you for inviting me today.
What a series of accolades there. I was just going through the list and I was thinking, when do I stop? You're letting this thing flow through so many different areas of life, aren't you? From sport to performance to business. Where does it stop?
Well, it never stops, and we should always be evolving and changing in life, Neil. And we're all frightened of change, but we should always have purpose, always have power, always be evolving, always be changing. Because if you look at a mobile phone is constantly changing. So why can't we? We are constantly resistant to change, and that comes from the emotion fear.
Yeah, I was wondering where we'd kind of start this conversation. We spoke just a little moment ago about going with the flow of the conversation, because there are so many, I guess, touch points that we could go into here, and so many different sort of angles and perspectives. But one of the patterns that I'm seeing, certainly within the business connections, but I guess in the wider kind of world right now, is this word fear. I'm seeing it coming from all different angles. Why do you feel? Certainly the work that you're doing obviously uncovers a lot of this, I guess, early on in the relationships that you build. But why do you feel right here, right now is kind of a fearful place to be?
Well, if you look at Tesla cars and you look at everything is energy and emotion, and that comes from emotion, energy and motion. So Tesla cars built his electric car on a vibrational frequency. So frequencies are everything now, and they're coming everywhere. They're being used in music. So we all vibrate on a frequency. So Ron Hubbard, who invented the Scientology religion, did some research, and he worked in conjunction with the Institute of Heart Math. So if I walk into a room today, Neil, and I'm meeting you today, my frequency and my vibration and energy level is very, very high. I'm probably on an 8 or 9 today. I've eaten well, I've slept well, I've just trained before I met you today. But if I'm on a low vibration, I will unfortunately pull you down. So the emotions which are associated with low vibration are fear, anger, resentment, sadness, blame, all these things. And when we look at the body from an Ayurvedic or a Hindi perspective is based on a chakra system. So from a psychology point of view, and if you talk to some very, very famous psychiatrists and psychologists, most of us have an adult body, but we're actually behaving at the age of 11 or 12. And this is the way we've been educated up through the system. So you see this in politics, you see this in war. So we make reactional gestures and movements instead of coming from a place of reflection. So fear, when we meet somebody and they don't think the way that we do, they perhaps don't look the same, they have a different religious belief, they may be a different color, they may be a different creed, different medical status, that's where fear comes from. But it's really important to remember that we are all connected at a cellular level. We are all connected and we all reach out to each other in a vibration. So if we want to change the world, we have to change ourselves first. So you're my brother, you're my son, you're my father. We really have to love ourselves. And when we love ourselves, we can feel love for another. And that's rising up and coming up to that, high place of neutrality, of courage, of leading the way, of discipline, of being a warrior mindset, of having empathy and compassion, and also really connecting with people before that, we correct them. So if I say to you, Neil, don't do this, don't do that, you're not going to do what I say. You're going to resist. So we want to, first of all, connect to people, find out where they are, where they want to go, and what do they feel they need to do to get there, and what are you knowingly doing that's holding you back. So we all hold ourselves back, and we all go down, to this low level vibration, and it really is, if you research it now, it's everywhere now. So we want to rise up, take ourselves up, and when we rise, we take other people with us.
So I want to explore kind of what we can do about that knowledge, because,
Yes.
Useful tips and kind of
Yes.
trying to take things forward obviously is key here. But I'm interested in your take there, because the way you describe that, it almost feels that we're kind of internally out of balance with the external, because a lot of the things you described there as being almost the catalysts or the
Yes.
triggers for this fear, which
Yes.
obviously is a big inhibitor. These all seem, well, most of them seem kind of external things, and yet we're kind of getting out of balance internally by these external triggers. Am I reading that right?
Yes, you are, Neil. So it's our true connection to the soul, which is the most important, and our ability to, really face our subconscious and find consciousness within inside. So when I react or when I do something, it's actually coming from my subconscious or unconscious behavior. So 95% of what we do is programming, only 5% is change. So we've really got to connect with our soul, and we can do that through different ways. My ways to do it is through dance, through art therapy, through listening to music. There are many ways of doing it, and there is no right or wrong way, but it's when we connect to ourselves that we can really connect to our others. So the most intimate relationship you will have is always with yourself first. When you learn that love for yourself and learn that deep soul connection, then you're not as stimulated or you're not as reactive with the outside world.
So do you see this with the people that you work with? Because I guess with musicians, we often see the backstage pre-concert kind of moment where the musician is kind of going deep inside themselves. They're kind of maybe doing a little meditation or a little kind of warm-up routine, very, very privately, very kind of solo, to get themselves into the right space. In sport, obviously, we see people like, say, downhill skiers, that they're kind of mentally rehearsing and visualizing the whole of the run before then taking their body through the whole of the run. Is this, as kind of either business people or others in kind of normal walks of life, is this really what we should be doing to kind of start that reconnection, is taking that sort of time out for ourselves?
Yes, I do think we need to take more time out, Neil, because it's, as you said to me before, we're all busy, but most of us are busy fools. So we have so many distractions in life, and we're stimulated, and we think we are the consumer, but we're actually being consumed by many different ways. And most of it is shopping, isn't it? Somebody is always trying to sell to us something, this, that, and the other. But you need to have, it's not about clearing your mind and having complete state of nothing in your mind. It's about finding space and able to find creativity. And this is where entrepreneurs and business people can really take that leap. So because I've worked, Neil, with so many high-level professional athletes and very, very high, level, very, very famous singers. Most of those people, in fact, every one of those people that I have worked with has experienced some pain in their life. So pain can be an incredible driver, and it's whether you can turn that pain into your power and whether you want to turn that pain into your power. And sometimes your peer group, your environment won't support you, your schooling won't support you. But if it doesn't, you've got to find ways through the internet, through podcasts like yourselves, where you can get ideas and you can go out and throw them into the universe and find, can I make money from this? Can I make a business from this? Am I good at football? Would I be better doing rugby? Would I be better doing cricket? Can I I sing, all these things again come back to the vibrational level. So the footballers and boxers and rugby players I've worked with, they might be categorized as autistic or ADHD. I would disagree. I think they need to move more. They've put their power into their movement and they've found their, passion for life. The singers have released their pain through their throat chakra. There is always a way, and we all have so much potential. It's whether you can find it and release it yourself, or whether you need to find a mentor or a coach to help you find your goal, dream, and legacy in life.
So that idea then that we all have this potential, I want to go a little bit deeper into that one, because
Yes.
that sounds really exciting, whether it's professionally or personally. If we all have a huge amount of this almost untapped potential that we're kind of locking down because the external world says you're not good enough, or we do comparisons with others and think
Yes.
I'm not good enough. And obviously there's a lot of that kind of thing going on right now. Is where do we begin that kind of, I guess, discovery or that exploration of what I might be good at? Because you talk about singing there, but also there might be potential for doing sport to a very high level, or there could be something that you just have the right kind of business idea that might then change the world, or might just change the community in which you live in. Where would Nisha, from your perspective, where would you begin with that?
Well, I would begin, first of all, Neil, by actually going to my library, because so many things are free. And I don't know who's listening to this and where you are around the world, but there's plenty of business hub groups on things like Meetup, which are international. The libraries in the UK have creative business starts up where you can go and express your idea. But one thing I need to say, Neil, if somebody says they don't agree with it or they don't think it will work, you don't need to believe what they say. You just need to keep trying. So if you look at most entrepreneurs have failed so many times. So for me, there's no winners and losers. There's only winners and learners. So I learn more by losing and the things which go wrong, the criticism which the business might get, things which go wrong in my life, or relationships, or disputes, than the things that go right. So you have to be prepared to fail before you go up, and sometimes you have to get to rock bottom before you go up.
So I guess there's a lot of things there in terms of similarities between, say, the sports teams that you look after and support, and somebody in business, because we know with sport, that you cannot literally win every match or every contest or whatever sport you're playing. So it is about that learning from the setbacks. It is learning from the losses. It is learning from, okay, maybe we're great in the first half, but the second half, there is just something that happens. We can't sustain it. So what do we learn? What do we learn? How do we kind of listen more actively then? Because I think a lot of people will say, yeah, it's all very well, Neil and Nisha, you're saying this, but I'm not a great listener. I tend to get distracted, or I tend to want to listen to others because I don't have a lot of self-confidence. Where do we start to really kind of tap into that innate wisdom inside us?
Yes. Well, it's funny you've said that, Neil, because so many of the professional footballers, rugby players, and very famous singers that I've worked with, they get so much criticism, so much negative energy through social media. So every time we point the finger at one person, there are three coming back from us. So, you have to have that stiff upper lip and not care what people say, because when we have time to criticize others, everybody we're criticizing is actually doing more than us. And if you can't stand the criticism and you're not quite as tough, it may not be the business for you. But there's always a way to reprogram. So there's a lot about central nervous system reprogramming now, parasympathetic, sympathetic. So things like breath work, cold showers or cold plunges, just creativity. I've seen this very much in golf. So I used to play a lot of golf. So it's not particularly hitting the golf ball through a set proper swing. It's just swinging it around, just messing with the ball outside. Any creativity thing you can find, just doodling with a pen, anything like that can be reprogramming, for you. And it's finding what's right for you, Neil, because we're all different, as you say. But what I find is from a holistic entrepreneurial point of view and from a business point of view, you cannot give to others till you've given to yourself. And healthy choices come from a healthy body. So you have to eat right, because everything we consume affects every cell in the body. So if you're eating a diet full of processed food, you're not going to have the energy. All the food that we consume affects the hormones in the body. The hormones will either take us into fight or flight, which is catabolic breakdown, or parasympathetic, which is repair and recovery. You know, everything you're watching through your eyes. Are you watching things which are all negative? Are you exposing yourself to the news all the time? Or are you listening to podcasts, perhaps reading, you know, watching things which are going to stimulate you? Are the peer group around you going places, or are they stuck in a rut as well? So you've got to take yourself out of the situation. So it's like if you look in a dirty lake and you see one beautiful lotus flower blossoming. Now, the lotus flower is a symbol in India, and it's very, very much a very important symbol, because out of murky water, true beauty can grow. So we can all do it, and you see that from all walks of life. I've seen it, you know, in so many football cases, but you've got to want it, Neil, and you've got to keep fighting it. And you're right, it may not work, and you know, there's lots of negatives. There is no positive without negative. So yes, you might win one week, and the next week your team might lose, and then everybody's against you. But you've got to take the, you know, the rough with the smooth, because life isn't going to be a plateau. It's up and down all the time. But the healthier your body, the better ability you are to come from a place of reflection rather than reaction. So breath work, slow down. So the Buddha said, or the samurai warriors said, before they chopped somebody's head off, and this is an awful connotation, but it's true, they used to take 7 deep breaths. So before I react to you with road rage, or you've taken my car spot, I need to stop, take 7 deep breaths, and then react.
And that's in decision making, that's in the moment of anger, that's in everything, isn't it? This is life advice, not just entrepreneurial advice, isn't it? Because this plays out, almost kind of develops a good kind of set of human habits, doesn't it, really? Because obviously a lot of the analogies that we talk about here in sport and in music, they play out obviously in business, but they play out everywhere. So this is about almost getting into touch with the real you, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Well, our programming actually comes from the age of 0 to 7, Neil, and you've probably heard that on other podcasts. So 0 to 7 is where we are most influenced. Now, because in the UK we go to school at 4, our left brain tends to develop before our right brain, so we tend to be logical, analytical, but then that closes down the right brain. What I find with all the creative industries that I work with in business, in football, in professional singing, those children might not have studied as much as school. They might have had less concentration, which is like me. So they probably develop the right brain first. And most millionaires and billionaires actually have no qualifications. I'd say a lot of them would be called autistic, dyspraxic, dyslexia, because they found a different way of problem solving, a different way of looking at things. So if you go to Sweden and places like that, they do more forest schooling, more Rudolf Steiner, you know, more Montessori. So you do more things through skill, playfulness, building relationships with the self and others, going out in the woods. So they develop the right brain and then start to go on to the left brain, you know, later on. So they have, you know, less problems and things.
You've talked a lot to this point about the whole, obviously, ongoing learning, and this whole thing about, you know, it's consuming, it's reading, it's understanding, it's listening. But one of the things that it feels to me that is coming through loud and clear here is this need to move. It feels like, because you're a very animate kind of, or animated person, so when you talk and you describe things, you move a lot. Is this a real kind of ability to tap into flow? Because you mentioned initially about this being all about energy. So I'm assuming that when you describe that, it is about activating the energy to make all these things more comfortable or more easy to do.
That's correct, Neil. So because we are stuck in, somebody else fixing us, and this is called transaction analysis. So we play the child and expect everybody else to play the parent. What I notice is as soon as somebody's ill or with anything, any sort of injury or anything, they stop and they do nothing. That's actually the worst thing. We should also always have flow in life. And remember, the word anatomy comes from the Latin name anatomane, to cut up. So nothing was ever disconnected in the body. After years of me doing cadaver, Neil, disconnections only happen because somebody like me came along with a scalpel and disconnected. So the flow is flow of breath, flow of the respiration, flow of the mindset, flow of all the oscillators, all the pumps in the body, flow of the digestive system, flow of the colon, flow of the lymph gland. And this is why when you end up bedridden in hospital, you have to have laxatives because the digestive system isn't flowing. So flow is very important for creativity and health. If you want to be healthy, you have to keep moving, Neil. And when you keep moving, you have more longevity in life. You have a better quality of life. You have a better emotion because movement, as you said, has a better way of channeling our emotions and helping us to deal in everyday life.
So from a business perspective, then it's kind of, we're almost shooting ourselves in the foot here,
Yes.
then, aren't we? Because we talk about going to work,
Yes.
and that's a place. And for a lot of people who are office based, it's a physical location.
Yes.
In we go, we sit down, so we stop moving. We spend hours and hours, as we all know, way too much time in front of screens. I do it. I'm sure you do it way more than you'd want to. So we're not helping ourselves here at all, are we? By the way that as a system we've set ourselves up, because it's almost like you're saying, to be entrepreneurial, to be successful in business or sport or music or any kind of walk of life, we need to move, we need to learn, we need to get into flow.
Yes.
And yet the way that we do all these things is often, right, let's sit down and talk about it, or let's sit down and go on a screen.
Yes.
How have we got this so wrong?
Well, we've got it so wrong by following schooling, education, governments and religion, Neil. So we always repeat, as Albert Einstein said, repeating the same behavior gets the same results. So we're not willing to change. But if we actually look at what we're doing, most of the things we are doing are not working. So we need to change everything in life. And I understand that's very easy for me to say, but it is possible. But in order to change, we have to all come together, and say, right, this is not working. Let's get more support. Let's get tribe, because tribe was, how people survived years ago. And when there was a problem, the tribe or the community pulled together. So we can change, Neil. We can change everything, and it's never too late. And this is where, an entrepreneur has a big, ability to change the world and, stimulate the people around him by looking at planet Earth. What are we doing to planet Earth? Giving back. So if we want flow and abundance to come to us, so I call money energy, we also have to give out. So if I want people to help me, I have to help others. And by helping others through donations, charitable donations, and doing lots of things, which a lot of businesses do, is how we keep the circle of life going. So we all have to contribute. When we have this no contribute attitude, it doesn't work. We all have to do something. And Gandhi used to have an ashram, and it's still there in Ahmedabad in northern India. And in the ashram, they had 3 skills: weaving, spinning, and pottery. So the blind, deaf, and dumb all had something to do. So they felt part of the community. They had purpose, goal, dream, and legacy. Because when you have purpose, goal, dream, and legacy, you don't have time to be sick.
That's a great North Star, if we want to call it that, because having that kind of core purpose, I mean, that's going to be something that's going to want to make you flow and move and learn and develop and listen and be proactive, isn't it? I mean, where do you find that kind of having core purpose fits into the work that you're doing? Is it a motivator for the teams or the musicians that you work with? I mean, I'm curious whether or not that is the kind of the bigger driving force, or is it something about more the collective? Where do you see that playing out?
Yeah, well, I see the other side because all these people are just everyday people, Neil, like you and me, and they do so much charity work. And, when a lot of the professional footballers retire, they have a plan of action that years ago they didn't see. So a lot of them became alcoholics, drug addicts. A lot of the singers that I work with do a lot of charitable things or are doing albums. And a lot of the people that I've worked with are still doing singing gigs or acting gigs. So having that goal, purpose, and legacy is so important. And there's a psychiatrist called Jerry Welsh, and he says when you've got a big enough dream, you don't have a crisis. Those people who are living the dream don't have time to be sick. So it's easy for me today to sit here, Neil, when everything's going right. But what happens is when there's bereavement, when there's a business problem, when there's a problem with the daughter, when there's a problem, divorce, when there's a problem, when there's war, how do we find stability? That's when you really show whether you've got your core values in hand and whether you really, really have that goal, dream, or legacy. Because when you are on that path, you always have focus and you're not pulled and sidetracked by the drama and the cortisol and the low vibration emotions of fear, guilt, blame, sadness, grief. They're all low level emotions.
So when this is really interesting. So when we have that kind of more, let's just call it purpose-driven lifestyle. So we have this kind of core set of beliefs, this core kind of calling, I guess you could call it that, if you want to get a little bit spiritual about it. And once you've established that, then that is almost, there's the optimum balance. And then what you're saying, I think, is that there will be peaks and troughs as everyday life kind of, comes through us and around us, but always then drawing us back to this balance, this kind of central theme. So it could be something as extreme as a bereavement of somebody very close to you, or it could be that your business gets into significant financial hardship. And let's face it, I think most of us have been there at some point in both of those things. But if you have this kind of core central theme, this higher purpose running through it, that is always that, almost that, it's not a comfort blanket as such, but it's that core that you come back to, or that you're just magnetically drawn back to. Am I reading this right?
Yes, you are. And you've got to also, your quality of life, Neil, is based on the quality of your questions. So just because somebody tells you something, it doesn't mean you're correct. So I'll give you an example. My mother passed away very, very painfully 5 weeks ago, Neil. She had a brain hemorrhage and she, was told she only had a few hours to live, and she lived for 10 days. The first 3 days were initial shock for me. I hardly did anything. My body wanted to, go tight into a ball, into this fetus position to protect itself. It didn't want to move. It didn't want to do anything. But after 3 days, I really got my act together. So I got up, had a cold shower every day, and made sure I ate clean all the way through. So that's no processed food, so a high protein and fat diet. Then I made sure I did some purpose every day, even if it was 1 or 2 hours of work or teaching in the morning. Then I'd go and sit in the hospital. Now, my mother was on a ward of 6 people, and I wanted her to stay on that ward because she kept choking because she couldn't breathe. And what I did was, I never cared what anybody else did. I sat and I stood and I sang mantra, and all the nursing staff and all the people who did the tea and coffee used to come and listen to me singing. Then I used to sing to my mother even though she was unconscious. I prepared myself for her death. And remember, those low-level emotions of grief, I'm only feeling that because the way we are conditioned in the West. In India, Neil, and in a lot of spiritual practices, and I spiritually have practiced a lot of Osho work, when somebody dies, it's a celebration. So all this morbidity and hanging on, we don't know what happens when we die, but it should be a celebration. So I had to keep that mindset tuned. There was nobody on my mindset. I played above my mother's head the vibration of the frequency of the brain, which I learnt off Tesla, how every organ has a different brain. And I made sure that I looked after myself because I couldn't give to my mother till I gave to myself. So it was a strong body is a strong mind, and I really feel that I really showed, what I could do with strength. And it's not to say it doesn't hurt, Neil. The business went downhill for 2 months, which it has done, because I took my foot off the pedal. But guess what? When you go down, you bounce back 10 times better. So it's like an awakening for me. I've got so much energy, so much experience, so much diversity after my mother's death, because she's really left something amazing. And that's me, and I'm the legacy. So it's everything. Is everything happening to you or for your growth? Am I a victim of my circumstances, or am I going to be the architect of my future? Because my mother wouldn't certainly want me suffering. And, I believe my mother's body was the vessel, and the spirit and soul live on. So in her, when she's died, that's allowed another, birth to happen on the earth. So that's my philosophy.
Wow, that's so powerful. And
Yes.
thank you so much, Nisha, for being
Yes.
vulnerable here to kind of share
Yes.
that obviously
Yes.
very emotional moment
Yes.
with us, because wow, it's like, where does the conversation go there? Because that is the most, I guess, profound thing that can happen to most of us, is when
Yes.
somebody very, very close to us almost, as you say, tests resolve, it tests commitment, it tests
Yes.
faith, however
Yes.
anybody wants to kind of define faith.
Yes.
And it's very interesting. I just want to pick up on that point that you make there, that when you get into such a low kind of place, potentially the bounce back is so powerful.
Yes, it is.
Do you see that playing out with a lot of your clients?
I
Because
do
obviously you work with a lot of successful people, don't you?
Yes, I do. I definitely see it playing out. But, a lot of people who are very successful are also prone to going right the way down. So you do see that with a lot of them, famous singers and, famous footballers and things. But most of them have managed to, turn their background of hardship, perhaps abuse, whether it's been domestic abuse or violent abuse or physical or verbal abuse, into something positive. And remember, when we upgrade ourselves, we upgrade other people around us, and we give other people hope in life. So, just having hope is great, but, talk is cheap, Neil, but action is the only answer. So many people contact me all the time and say, I want to start a business, and say, what are you doing about it? You've just got to try. You've got to be prepared to fail so many times. You've got to be prepared to turn up and nobody turn up. You've really got to. And, I love movement. I love Pilates. I love, movement of the mind, body, life coaching. Whatever I do, whether we're selling, freezers, whether we're selling cars, I would have that passion for everything that, I do. It's just that my preference is movement, but it's finding your passion, because when you find your passion, it's easier to do. And most people are stuck in relationships and jobs which they'd like to change, but they don't have the courage to change because it's what they've always known, or it's what their parents have done. You've got to break that pattern.
It feels like it's giving yourself permission to
Yes,
really live, isn't it? Because it is very, very simple. Well, it's probably a default state to try and maintain consistency and continuity, and almost like, don't rock the boat, just keep doing what you're doing. Again, goes back to the Einstein thing, doesn't it? It's like, you just want the same thing, just keep doing what you're doing. But to actually live and to actually progress and to get back to this kind of higher sort of purpose that we were talking about before, it feels like you have to give yourself permission to step out of that comfort zone and take the hits, because you'll bounce back even stronger. Learn more, because then you can then project yourself forward further. It is about just holding on to this thing and just going for the ride, isn't it?
It is. And we aren't all the same makeup. And people will say to me all the time, well, it's all right for you, but it's not all right for me, Neil. A great life doesn't happen by accident. It happens by planning. And I'm a planner all the time. So I'm always creating, something now in the present moment or the future. I'm trying not to be dragged by the past. And we're all dragged by the past, but it's be creating a life for the future. And I want to say something controversial to you, Neil. I talk to homeless people all the time, and they'll say, can I have a £5, love? Can I have £1? I would say most homeless people have great entrepreneurial tendencies and have the ability to get themselves out if they wish, because I certainly couldn't do that. I certainly couldn't sleep or rough it. So they've experienced so much hardship that they could experience hardship in business. And the same as a lot of people who are in prison, a lot of those have entrepreneurial tendencies, but it's whether they fulfill it decide to change their peer group and, whether their path takes them that way. So I would say there's so much things we can be doing and so much things which are undiscovered, and you have to have a group around you which believe in you as well, but you've also got to want to change and not be dragged back, because it's easier to repeat the same behavior over and over again than it is to change, isn't it?
So one of the things that I just would love your take on, actually,
Yes.
Nish, because I'm getting a lot of, I guess, conversation, and I'm hearing a lot at the moment about this tussle between present, so right here, right now, in the moment, today, in this kind of conversation right here, like the now, versus actually setting a plan for the future. Because a lot of people, obviously, in business are they're working to a forecast, they're working to a budget, they're working to a plan. So it's very future centric.
Yes, it is.
What's your take on that as a bit of a planful person? Because clearly you're saying there that you've got a big plan, you've got a big dream, or lots of dreams, I'm sure. Well, what is this kind of role, or this dynamic then, between having the kind of the longer term aspiration and those dreams, but actually living in the moment? Because it's a bit of a duality, isn't it? That?
Well, I call it Yosemite effect. So the Yosemite is this great, amazing park below San Francisco. So what we say at an unconscious or subconscious level is what we get back in life. And this is what people don't realize. So I'll give you an example. Say famous people like Elizabeth Taylor, or all these famous celebrities who've been married 4 or 5 times. What happens is they keep meeting different people, but it's actually their subconscious which is calling the same qualities in of that person. So they might change the person, but the subconscious is speaking at the, dragging them back into that same unchanged deep behavior. So the Yosemite effect is, if I shout out into the Grand Canyon or into the Yosemite Canyons, I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight comes back. If I shout out, I have lost 5 pounds. I have lost 5 pounds. I am healthy. I am healthy. I am strong. I am strong. I am abundant. And this sounds very woo-woo, Neil. And this is where people get confused with the law of attraction. It's, it's sort of, it's not about fake it till you make it. I'm not saying that. I actually don't want people to do that at all. You have to have belief in yourself. So, what we say to the universe is actually what we're reflecting. So, when people are in chronic pain, if this is why it comes back to goal, dream, and legacy. So when you don't have purpose, goal, dream, and legacy, the pain doctor will show up, because at a subconscious level, you're attracting what you don't want. So you're attracting that constant aggro, that constant trouble. So there's a new research paper, Neil, and I just checked this before I came online with you today, a 2022 research paper by a guy called Eric Kim, and he talks about older people, and there's a growing evidence now that a higher sense of purpose in life is associated with a reduced risk of chronic disease and also mortality. So you have to have purpose, but you also have to be careful what you're asking for, because the emotion of the mind and the body can't be separated. So if you're stuck with trauma, suffering from emotions in the body, that usually shows up as disease, and in the Buddhist way we call it dukkha, disease. So in functional medicine now we talk about lots of things in the body aren't just genetics, yes, will have a play in it. The genes load the gun, the environment pulls the trigger, but a lot of it is our emotional component, how we're dealing with life, how we're feeling. And that's why movement is so important, because it's an expression, it's a flow, it's a cellular movement. When we don't have movement, we have stagnation. When we have stagnation, we have blockages, and we have blockages, we have disease. Disease of the mind, disease of the body.
I'm seeing some real patterns here. I'm loving this conversation. Yes. There's so many little sound bites here, I think, that are, super practical for so many people. So we've got this higher purpose, we've got movement, we've got learning. I'm trying to remember all the other things. We've certainly got clean food and nutrition, because obviously that is the key fuel, the water, good hydration. But there's also, it feels like there is our self narrative, the language that we're using, not only externally, but also internally, because it feels that that's maybe the bond for all these things, and the stories we tell ourselves internally, both as entrepreneurs, as marketers, as business owners, or actually just everybody in general life. It is that kind of internal storytelling and narrative that's key, isn't it? Because that surely is going to be the one thing that bonds all these things together.
It does. So if you repeat the same story, you get the same results. And this is the problem, Neil. We all go back to a story. Everybody has a story, and you'll find, only because I have so many people who come to me with all different injuries, chronic pain, everybody has a story. There is never just an injury. There is never just a chronic pain. Even when I'm dealing with successful people, there is always a story. But the idea is to not keep repeating that story, and is to break that pattern. Now, we know by listening to people like Gabor Mate, who is also a very famous psychiatrist, that, a lot of our ancestral background will carry through that story in generation after generation. But Bruce Lipton, who is a very, very famous doctor and who was very, very laughed at many years ago, talks about, how we can change our genes, how we can change our cells. So yes, the cells want to mutate and they want to repeat that same story, but by giving the cells different things to do, you can change that cellular and that genetic compound. So yes, I might not be going to be a rugby player, I might not be going to be a famous singer, but we have the ability to change. So, also Eckhart Tolle talks about the power of now. Everything lies within us. We hold the answer to everything in life, Neil. We don't need the government. We don't need schooling. We don't need religion. All these things are telling us what to think. They're not teaching us how to think. All the answers lie within us, but we have to go deep inside. We have to come from a place of health. We have to look after the soil, look after the planet. And this is why entrepreneurs and business are so important, because the planet and the soil are everything, because we grow from the soil, and then when we die, we go back to the soil, from a dust point of view. So we can make change by changing ourselves.
I couldn't agree more, Nisha. This is just such great advice for all of us, and it's such a great reminder, because I know lots of this stuff, but it's just so lovely to hear it thrown back to me right between the eyes. It's like, Neil, remember to do it right now. Keep doing it right now. This is not something you put off till tomorrow. This is something to embrace right here, right now, isn't it? You've got a number of courses, and I believe you've also got an ebook. How do we get people connected more with you?
Well, Neil, I've got loads of free stuff, because I want to give as much stuff as I can free out to the world, so other people can also upgrade their mindset and their body, and they can change others. So you can research me just putting by Nisha Pilates in. I also have a website, which is called yogaanatomy.com, and I have an amazing free ebook, which is Transformation with Nisha. It's about weight training, which I've learned off Paul Chek, and also about holistic movement, which is Pilates and yoga, a little bit about hydration, water, sleep, and food, and how putting it all together, you can have that strong body and a strong mind. Because when we have a strong body, we have a strong mind. As above, so is below. So if we want to change everything, we have to start with the belief system. It's what you said, Neil. Everything starts with our story and up here. So if we want to change what's going down, we change what's up here first. So you can access any of those things by contacting me through Instagram, Facebook, through my website, and I will point you in the direction of my YouTube channels, and give you the link for the free ebook.
Wonderful. So we'll put all of those links in the description to this episode. So if anybody listening and watching this is keen to follow up and find out much more about Nisha's work, which is so incredibly powerful, and it's all research and evidence based. And it's been used by, countless people who you would know. Should we just leave it at that? Lots of people you would know. Nisha, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for your wisdom and time today.
Thank you, Neil, for having me, and thank you for triggering those questions in me as well, because the quality of our life is based on the quality of the questions that we ask.